Peace. What's happening, good people? This gift here for Pay Us No Mind. And let's have an honest conversation about music distribution. So, if you are an artist that is researching which distributor to use, you are an anomaly. You're a freak. Nah, really, you are someone who is business minded that's trying to make the best decision you can possibly make. But most artists are not. For most artists, it's a very simple thing. It's a layup. They go with the name they know. And the name they know is DistroKid. Because DistroKid cornered the market, right? When you had a time where CD Baby was charging artists like $70 per release, and TuneCore was charging artists like $50 per release per year, DistroKid came in with $20 a year for unlimited distribution. And that was a price you couldn't beat. So with that price point, everybody started using DistroKid. So now if you say, I want to get my music up on streaming platforms, I want to get my music in Spotify, simple thing you want to do. The name you're going to get is DistroKid. And if you are not somebody that's thinking deeply about it, you're just going to be like, okay, sign up for DistroKid. End of story. Now you got other artists that are aesthetic. They eat with their eyes. So they go to a company like DistroKid, they look at the website, they look at the infrastructure, and to them it seems cheap. It feels cheap. They don't like the price point. It seems lowly. So for those artists, they spin into something like TuneCore or CD Baby because of the aesthetic of it. It just looks like it's a higher quality product. Then just from the standpoint of functionality wise, right, from going by how artists function, you have artists that put a lot into the releases that they're putting together, where they're going to big studios, paying for studio time to have records recorded. They're paying for engineers to mix their records. They're paying for separate engineers to master their records. And it is a process for them to get a song done and ready to distribute. And those artists, going by my personal experience dealing with artists, those artists tend to use a TuneCore or a CD Baby. Now, for other artists that got like a home studio set up, they got a program on their computer, they're buying beats from BeatStars. This was back in the days, right? They're buying beats from BeatStars. Those artists were using DistroKid because it's like, hey, I didn't spend a whole lot of money to make the music. I'm not expecting a whole lot out of the music. So $20 a year, whatever I get, I don't really care. They weren't really thinking that much about it. And the reality is that even today, there's still that divide. You still have artists that are using and picking digital distributors based on what looks sexy as opposed to what does the best job. You still have artists that are just mass producing music and looking for the easiest way to just dump it out there. And then you still have artists that are investing a lot into their music that are looking for the best platform. So when you're researching which digital distributor to use, and you're looking at all of these reviews from artists talking about their experiences with the platform, it can be very confusing. And the decision can be very difficult because you're getting different people with different motives telling you about a platform serving their agenda, not so much about what you want it to do, but about whether it does what they want it to do. And the reality is that most of those artists don't know what to look for or even care about the things that they should look for. So you look at all of these artists in these bad recording deals, these bad management contracts, all of these things. It's not necessarily always nefarious. It's not like people blindfolded them, stuck a gun to their head and made them sign these contracts. A lot of them sat with lawyers that read the terms to them and they were like, bet, because they were more obsessed with fame and the validation of being signed than the actual terms of what they were signing. And that same logic holds with digital distribution, where you have a lot of artists that are more concerned with getting their music up on Spotify or on Apple Music or whatever than they are with any of the particulars dictating what happens with the digital distribution platform. Back when I first started doing reviews of digital distributors in 2012 on YouTube, nobody else was doing videos reviewing digital distributors on YouTube. You can find a few articles about it, but even in those articles, they weren't talking about things like transaction fees. They weren't helping artists understand the impact of the models, like percentage-based models versus flat annual fees, and how the two would overall impact your revenue and your profits. So there was a lot that wasn't being looked at. You know, even when I got into looking at the terms of agreement and breaking down United Masters terms of agreement and the issues that I saw with them, it's like nobody was talking about those things. Nobody was looking at those things. Nobody cared about those things. And to a great effect, right, I'm happy to say that I changed the game. Everybody started looking at that stuff. A lot more people talk about it, right? You got people with whole video series dedicated to the terms of use and stuff like that, man, which is great because now people are paying attention. But back then and still today, most artists do not care. Quickly, we have multiple guides available. One guide I'm using as a lead magnet to get your email so I don't have to be dependent on YouTube. That guide is called Ultimate Indie Artist Guide, Tools You Need, Lies You Don't. And that guide helps you to pick the best platform to use in every situation. Like for all of these different services, from performance rights organizations to publishing administrators to digital distribution to analytics tracking to royalty tracking, every company you need, we break down the best company to use and why. Then you have our ultimate guide to music monetization, which walks artists through how each platform monetizes music and how to best monetize their music on these platforms, how these systems work, the positives, the pros, and the cons. Everything you need to know about music monetization is in that guide. There's a link to both of those guides in the description box. Music distribution is a very simple thing. Get your music in stores, collect your royalties, pay you your royalties, give you a report telling you where your music got streams and sales, and how much you earn. Simple. For most artists, as long as their releases show up in stores and everything is spelled right and the cover artwork looks like it should, they're ecstatic. They're going to say, hey, the distributor is the best. And then if they get a royalty report and they got some money, oh my God, it's amazing. And that's the way that they're going to see it. You'll only hear when something goes wrong. And for most distributors, that's rare. But when you take everybody that has had an issue with a distributor and you consolidate it into one place like Trustpilot or YouTube, it looks like a high percentage of people are having a problem with that distributor, when a lot of times it's a tiny percentage, maybe 1%, maybe less. And the reality is, people who have a good experience aren't inspired to talk because they just move on to the next thing. So if I distribute my music and my music shows up into stores like it's supposed to, I move on to promoting my release and driving traffic to the stores to get streams. If I get a royalty payment, I'm taking my money and I'm using my money to pay my bills or to buy something that I want, right? Go to a restaurant or something like that. I'm not like, oh, okay, this company did what I paid them to do. Let me go to Trustpilot and write a review congratulating them for it. That's not the thing that I'm thinking to do. That's not how most people operate. People only want to do reviews when things go bad. That's most of the time that people want to write a review, when the service fell short of what they paid for. So that makes it look like a lot of people have issues when there might not be a lot of people that have issues. So to combat that, a lot of distributors have to incentivize people to write reviews or coach people to reach out and say, hey, could you write a review if you like this? Because people just don't naturally do it. And you know that when you look at Trustpilot and you see reviews like above and beyond, amazing, stellar, stuff like that. Those are coached reviews. But the reality is that the reviews that you see online a lot of times coming from artists can be lopsided. Now, the elephant in the room with music distribution today is streaming fraud and copyright infringement, because now you see a lot of reviews and complaints around people getting flagged for streaming fraud and copyright infringement. And what artists need to recognize is that you have a lot of sinister players in this game right now that aren't in music and doing digital distribution because they want to be the best artist, or because they want fans, or because they want accolades or a pat on the back, right, through recognition from fans. They are in this to make money. That's what they're in this to do. They looked at the game, they said, oh, okay, well, YouTube is saying you can make money. All you got to do is get people to watch. Spotify is saying you can make money. All you got to do is get people to listen. They don't have to love it. They don't have to even like it. All you got to do is get them to listen, and you can make money. And people saw that, and they saw an opportunity to get paid. But it's deceptively difficult because it's not easy to get people to listen, and it's not easy to get people to watch. And that is what leads those people that's motivated to make money to do nefarious things to get the goal of why they distributed music, which was to make money. So you have those people doing things like how they had free music library. These are things I'm telling you guys, these are things that I've seen throughout my experience working with artists and even working with digital distribution companies and people that I know that run digital distribution companies. You have artists that, or, you know, using the term artist loosely, right, that will see audio libraries that allow YouTube content creators to use royalty-free music in their videos. And YouTube creators use these royalty-free songs, they put them in their videos. Somebody says, oh man, all of these videos are using these royalty-free songs. So then they go and they download these royalty-free songs and they do digital distribution for the royalty-free songs and turn on Content ID. So then all of these videos on YouTube that has music from these libraries in them start getting flagged for copyright infringement, even though they are using royalty-free music, because some a-hole went and did that to try to make some money. And then you got some of these guys that go and they take TV shows that they know are popular, like Caillou and Dragon Ball Z, and they put their song at the end of it, or whatever instrumental or whatever have you at the end of it. So then people watch these episodes and the videos got Content ID on them, so then they make a whole bunch of money through Content ID from people watching the episodes and getting the songs at the end. But that's copyright infringement, uploading somebody else's music that you're not permitted to upload to YouTube. Then you got people who are straight up uploading other people's music, like taking a Beyonce song and slowing it down and speeding it up and uploading it to platforms. You know, you got all sorts of unauthorized remixes, unauthorized jacks, all sorts of stuff going on, and then people get flagged and their music gets removed, and you don't know what they were doing. You don't know what the situation is. They don't tell you what really happened. They just say, hey, I didn't do anything wrong. These guys flagged me for no good reason. They're taking my royalties. They suck. And then you look at that and you say, well, damn, man, this is what's happening. This is what this distributor's doing, right? And then, you know, you become cautious and don't want to use them. But listen, it's people abusing the system. It's real. But being honest with you, keeping it 100, man, I don't know any artists that have been flagged for streaming fraud. I know a few artists that have been flagged for copyright infringement, but guess what? They were guilty, because the culture in hip-hop is catch me if you can. So there is a flood of unauthorized samples and unauthorized remixes, and people kind of like uploaded the releases with their fingers crossed, hoping they wouldn't get caught. Matter of fact, let me reverse that. I actually do know a couple of artists that got flagged for streaming fraud. But guess what? They were guilty too. So one artist, I had used an agency that said, hey, we are going to promote, quote unquote, promote your music, right? And we use real people. We're going to get real people to stream your music. So they didn't know what the company was doing, but the company was engaging in streaming fraud. And they got caught up in that. And the distributor at the time didn't remove the music. It just removed the fake streams and didn't pay them on the fake streams, but their music remained up on streaming platforms. Another artist that I know was using a company that has this service where they get your music used by Lyft drivers. But what they were doing was paying the Lyft drivers to play a Spotify playlist of the songs that the artists were paying them to put on the playlist. And that is streaming fraud, because the right way to do it would have been to have their own system where they just give the Lyft drivers a playlist that's not connected to any streaming platform and have them play the music. And then if people like the music, they could look it up on their own and find their way to Spotify and stuff like that. By putting it on a Spotify playlist, they're effectively doing payola. They're paying them to listen to the playlist, which makes it streaming fraud. But the artist doesn't really understand that. They just say, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to pay a penny and I'm going to get a stream. You know, it's really cheap. So for a lot of people, they look and they say, hey, if something looks too good to be true, right? But for a lot of artists out there, it's wishful thinking. They're hoping that it's actually true. You know, that these things are going to allow them to pay $20 and get them thousands of streams. And they jump on it. And then things don't work out and they end up getting flagged. But the artists that I know that steer clear of that stuff, where they're just advertising their music through Facebook, you know, or through Instagram, and they're promoting their music organically through content and stuff like that, they're not having any problems. What happens when something does go wrong? The issue here is customer support. And you have a lot of complaints around customer support for all distributors at a certain price point. And that is due to the fact that they do not have a customer support staff that is relative to the size of the clientele. They're charging artists $20 a year for unlimited distribution. So they attract a massive amount of artists that use the service. And there's just not enough people to really provide a high level of quality customer support to each of those artists that they have signed up. So it is definitely a matter of you get what you pay for. So you see some distributors like TuneCore start to tier off customer support, where they say, hey, if you pay us this amount, we'll get to you in 5 days. If you pay us that amount, we'll get to you in 3 days. If you pay us another amount, we'll get to you in 1 day. So they start charging you more for faster support. And that is due to scaling issues where there's not enough money coming in to handle the amount of artists using the service. And that also factors into the heavy-handed approach with streaming fraud, where you get accused, you get removed. Copyright infringement, you get accused, you get removed. They do not have the capacity to address each individual accusation. So accused, remove is the most profitable strategy. Now, artists don't want to be in that position, right? Artists say, hey, they want quality customer support. They want to be able to plead their case in the case of being accused of something that they feel like they didn't do, like with streaming fraud or a copyright infringement claim. And the reality is, you are not going to get the same treatment paying $30 a night at a motel that you would paying $200 a night at the Marriott or something like that. They charge the prices they charge for a reason. You're not going to get the right this way, sir treatment at McDonald's. So let's do this. Let's imagine digital distributors were restaurant chains and put digital distributors in buckets of restaurant chains. First, you got the local spots. For me and my experience, that's Kennedy Fried Chicken, Obama Fried Chicken, American Fried Chicken, some type of fried chicken spot, or a local Chinese food restaurant. And in that bucket, you got Root Note, Amuse, and DistroKid. Then you have restaurants like McDonald's, Burger King. And in that bucket, you have distributors like TuneCore, Ditto, and CD Baby. Then you have Chick-fil-A. And in that bucket, you have Lander and Symphonic. Then you have restaurants like Applebee's and Red Robin. And in that bucket, you have companies like AWOL and Symphonic, the higher tier that you have to apply for, 1RPM and Record Union. Then you have the Cheesecake Factory. And in that bucket, you have Venice Music, Downtown Music, Believe, and The Orchard. Now, the way you feel about these types of restaurants is the way you should feel about the distributors that are in those buckets. And when it comes to reviews of these services, where people eat tells you a lot about the quality they're looking for. If y'all want to know my picks for digital distribution and why I think these are the best companies to use, you can download my guide. It's a link to it in the description box. Really, you should download all of the guides. So we have one guide that tells you which platforms to use for every situation, from PROs to publishing administration to distribution to analytics to everything you would need. That guide breaks that down. And we also have an ultimate guide to monetization, which tells you how all of these different platforms monetize, how to make the most of the different platforms and their monetization systems, and how to get the most out of your music in regards to making money from it online. As always, y'all can agree to disagree or agree, whatever the case may be. Feel free to reach me at Payusnomind on Instagram, at Payusnomind on Twitter /X, payusnomind@gmail.com. This is Gift signing off. Pay us no mind. Peace, good people. One.